Hi, everybody. I believe that we are live. I have faith that we are live. Right on. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Common Ground. We're going to start here in just a moment. Delighted to be with you as always. See a couple of you. Hi, Ken and Denise. Very good to see you. Good to be with you. Right on. Delighted to be with you as always. Whoops. I double shared. All right, so good to be with you. We're going to start in just a few minutes, and I'll bring our guests on. We're going to let a few more people join. Hi. Good to have you here. Welcome. Thanks for being here tonight, everybody. You're here on Common Ground. I'm John Lombardo, your host. We will kick it off in just a moment. Thanks, right on. Glad you guys are here. Hey, look at that. I think I started on time tonight even. That's amazing. Fantastic. We're going to start in just a couple of minutes, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Glad you guys are here. Just letting a few people hop on before we get it started. Got a great show tonight. Hello. Charmin, good to have you. People are jumping on. Somebody typed in angry at me just now. That's funny. All right, everybody. Yeah, we're getting... Hi, Joe. Oh, boy. All right. Few people hopping on. Let's get things started. Get the show on the road. As we always do. Good evening. Thank you for being here. You are on Common Ground, the place where we seek to transform division into understanding. As I speak, fear and bigotry threat to tear our nation apart. And on this show, we seek to strike a blow against the fear that divides us by listening to one another as we discuss the most difficult topics with respect, civility, and a mind open to a differing opinion. I'm happy to tell you that we've found over and over again that when we can discuss our opinions freely, we can form an alliance of reason with our fellow citizens, even when we may not agree. We discover we're not all that different, and it's not so hard to reach common ground. I am your host, John Lombardo, delighted to be with you tonight. And our topic for tonight's discussion, censorship. When is it okay to be told to shut up? The United States of America in 2020 is an interesting place, wherein facts now take a backseat to beliefs, and perspectives are seen through the lens of tribal agendas first and reality second. This bipartisan fever has infected every aspect of our culture, including the ones protected by the First Amendment. Tonight, we're going to discuss how the bipartisan division in our country has impacted the way we view censorship, and if our communication habits make censorship necessary in the modern age. So welcome to Common Ground. That's what we're going to be talking about tonight. And of course, you are the stars of this show. We're going to bring you on, but I want to bring you guys up and get your opinions on the show. But first, I'm going to bring on my co-host, the smartest guy who still hangs around with me, Captain Eric Rodriguez. Hello, Eric.
Probably not even a captain.
Probably not even a real captain. How you doing, my friend?
Well, I'm doing good. I've had a very busy day, so I'm just settling in here and happy to be here.
Eric, that shirt you're wearing, is that what is that in reference to, or is it just a humble brag? Ah, disability rights are human rights. Not surprised to see you wearing such a shirt, my friend. All right, everybody. Clint said, when it's not on Friday, I'll join the convo, my friend. Keep up the good work. Clint, we can't wait to have you on. Hi, Joe Nasser. Joe Severino. Hey, buddy. Hi, Jeff. Hi, Monica. Glad you're here. So glad everybody's here. Thank you for being here tonight, everybody. And let's see here. Someone has, okay. So we're talking tonight about censorship, and I've got some interesting things to share with everybody on that subject. But what do you got anything you want to like kind of start us off with, Eric? Any thoughts you have about this?
Uh, let's see. Well, I think this really came up when we were talking about the frontline doctors and whether or not when social media took down their posts, the Breitbart had posted a video of them, and then social media started sharing that, and some social media outlets took it down. Um, and the stated reason was that it was distributing false information about a health concern. That in a nutshell is what the excuse is, and so I think it's a very interesting topic. What is and it's not just with the frontline doctors, but we have brought this up a couple times on the show in terms of the president being unhappy about certain tweets or certain Facebook posts being taken down. This goes into yet another topic we've talked a lot about conspiracy theories, and there's been a lot of QAnon posts that have been taken down recently. So I think that it's a very interesting topic in terms of social media. We've been talking about misinformation, and so where does that line? Where is that line? Where is the responsibility to take down information that is dangerous or might cost people their lives? And where does free speech come in? So I think it's an interesting topic.
And once again, it's so split along party lines and along the tribalism that I talked about in the opening comments. The people on the far right tell Hollywood to shut up. They don't want Kaepernick kneeling, but they freak out when Trump is fact checked. People on the left, they're screaming for civil liberties, and yet they're on the far left. I mean, they're banning people from college campuses and not wanting them to be able to speak if they don't agree with their viewpoints. So it's very much we're drawing these lines that we look at the world through that tribalism first and then reality next. And so we define things as something like censorship. It becomes censorship when it's prohibitive of something that I like. When it's prohibitive of something that I disagree with, it's okay with me. Do you know what I'm talking about? That's what I see.
I sure do. There isn't. I think for the majority of people, there isn't a principle being followed. It is a topic. It's which it's law and order or censorship or First Amendment when it's depending on the topic. And although I do want a little pet peeve and a little rant of mine, I would love for people to not ever tell somebody shut up and dribble or shut up and pass the ball or shut up and act. We are all citizens of this country, and our Constitution was written for us to participate. And it doesn't matter what somebody's job is, they get to participate and they get to say whatever their opinion is. Now, whether or not a company has to allow that, that's different. But they can go out on the street. Nobody said those doctors couldn't stand on the steps and say what they wanted. There were certain companies who are privately owned and maybe partially publicly owned, but not publicly as in the state, publicly as in stockholders. And so that's a different story. But we get to say whatever we want. That's what makes this country free. The First Amendment is the first for a reason. So, everyone gets their say.
Yeah, I agree with you completely, as long as what you're saying is not going to cause violence or harm to people. And I feel the same way. Don't tell somebody to shut up because of what they do for a living. The bottom line, if you have something, if I'm an actor and I have a platform, and I want to use it for whatever I want to use it for. You see John Voight and Clint Eastwood are quite conservative. You can see a lot of actors in Hollywood are quite liberal. But that's their platform. they're allowed to speak to it however they want, so long as they're not advocating violence or something that that would cause harm to people. And anytime I see somebody telling an athlete or an actor, look, if you don't like what they say, you may certainly counter it with your own points and your own your discussion points. But anytime I see somebody telling somebody, shut up and dribble, or shut up and I just want to see you act. I don't want to see, I don't want to hear your opinions. What that person is saying is, I don't like what you're saying, so stop saying it. That is a type of individual censorship that I think is, I'm not a fan of it. I don't care for a lot of things that I hear famous people say, but I don't feel for a moment I can tell them not to say it. Whatever happened to that old, whatever happened to that old adage? I don't believe. I might not believe in what you say, but I'll fight to the death to defend your right to say it. Remember that?
I sure do.
So let's bring on our guest tonight. Excited to have this conversation. Once again, this is Common Ground. Our conversation tonight is around censorship, and of course, it's interactive. Let me read a couple of comments before we bring Grace on. Carol said, of course it is censorship. The question is, when is censorship okay and when is it not? What are the guidelines? Carol, we're going to attempt to take a stab at that tonight. I don't think that's easy to determine, but we're going to take a shot at it. And Denise said, I absolutely agree with the hypocrisy of censorship only for things people don't like. Social media has its own rules about what kind of material can be posted, and they can be disinformation if they so desire. Yeah, we're going to look at some pretty insane examples of misinformation tonight, Denise. But I want to bring on our guest tonight. She's a practicing attorney for 22 years. She practices constitutional law and the rule of law. She's a delegate to the Democratic Party in the 45th Assembly District and recently completed Harvard University's course on, let me make sure I get this right so I don't sound like any more of an idiot than I already do. She's recently completed Harvard University's course on American government constitutional foundations. So let us welcome our guest tonight, Grace Rodriguez. Grace, it's so good to have you here.
Well, hello there, everybody. Let me adjust. Let me choose my virtual background a little bit more appropriately. Give me 1 second. Let's see. There we go.
Not any bankruptcy needs. Okay, so welcome, Grace. It's good to have you. This is Eric Rodriguez. He's my co-host.
Hi, Eric.
Hi, Grace.
Nice to meet you.
You too.
We're really glad you're here tonight, Grace. Thank you so much for being here. We talked about one of the points that I made as we started the show tonight, Grace, was how censorship is yet another idea that we have begun to look at through the lens of bipartisanship, through the lens of whatever tribe we belong to. If what you're saying is something I agree with and other people want to stop you from saying it, it's censorship. If I don't like what you're saying, I'm okay with you being shut up. Like we were talking about how people are always telling Hollywood, shut up and act. Athletes, shut up and dribble the ball. But if those same people might not like seeing someone like the president censored on Twitter. So what should we redefine what censorship is around these new rules of engagement and all this misinformation that's out there?
Well, you're really asking a question that's been the topic of debate since the inception of this country. We have these certain constitutional civil liberties that we have defined going back 240 years or more. And in defining what those liberties are, which includes this freedom of expression and freedom of the press, which encompasses some of this concept of free speech, is that we have always had to create a balancing act between public safety versus how much liberty do we allow. I mean, if anybody can say anything, we know from the fire in the theater example, you're not allowed to yell fire in a theater. We also know that we have laws against slandering people. You can't say things that are not true about somebody. You also can't incite imminent harmful action. So there's rules around what kind of speech is permissible, and depending on the context of that speech, the government is allowed to put in more regulation or less regulation. So I think one of the things where we first kind of see this kind of action is, you got to remember one thing: they're talking about Congress, and it applies to the states through the 14th Amendment. that Congress shall make no laws abridging our freedom of speech. So what we're talking about is government actors. So a lot of people, exactly what you hit upon, Eric, one of the things you were talking about was the idea that these are private companies, and that private companies themselves, they have the ability, they're not subject to First Amendment requirements in terms of what it does with its users. However, as a private company, they cannot discriminate based on a protected class. So if I have a protected class of people, say disabled people, and they're speaking about something, and I create a regulation in my social media that it's not saying disabled people can't say this, but I start putting all kinds of restrictions about the kinds of commentary activism I can speak about for disabled people, then I may be affecting that class of people. So I have to be a little bit cautious on how I've set those regulations in place. But what we've seen and what I've shared with you today, on March 19th, the Congressional Research Service, they have lawyers that work there, and they put out opinion papers for the Congress to look at about different aspects of laws that they're trying to regulate. And there's one that was put out on March 27th, 2019, that has a very good discussion about talking about the balancing act that we have between regulating, providing, giving space for liberty, and protecting the community at the same time. So going to your point about these doctors that were putting out information, one of the things that we see in the law right now, at least as far as federal regulation is concerned, is, and I'll give you the quote for it in a second, but what it is that if they do not editorialize the social media centers, like if Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, if they don't provide some regulation, editorial regulation, then they may be giving up their protected rights for the First Amendment, because then they're more like a newspaper, aren't they? And newspapers have the right, they have free press to be able to publish and promote. So by editorializing, by putting limits on what they'll allow on their social media platform, they're exercising those editorial rights that are protected under the First Amendment. But if they're only a platform with no kind of editorializing, then they open themselves up to regulation as a commercial provider, to be acting more like a common carrier, like a telephone or a fax machine. And since they don't regulate the content, then they may be regulated more specifically by the government. So they would have less protection if they didn't editorialize and delete certain media that they felt was no good. Now, one of the things that you see in most of the social media is where they're regulating is in the area of in the two areas in which the Supreme Court has frequently felt compelled to regulate. So in free speech, you can say just about anything you want, but you cannot be obscene. And the courts have defined that typically as they know it when they see it. Or you can't say things that slander another person, or you cannot say things that create a high probability that you will incite another to take eminent lawless action.
So, Grace, I want to interrupt you because I want to ask you about this.
Let me put one more thing just to finish that, and then I'll have an opening spot right there for you to talk about this, is that I think the next area of regulation should be inciting people to take action that could prove harmful to them or others. And one of those areas is right around this whole health issues. So you have the doctors who come on screen and they have different opinions about medically, but most of their colleagues disagree with them. And we don't know if the science is solid. So it's proper for the social media to say, no, we don't want to host this on our platform. That's their editorial right, and they can't be abridged by that. The Congress can't take an action to stop the social media from removing that content. And on the other hand, these doctors are going to say, well, don't we have a right to speak? And like to your point, Eric, exactly. They have a right to stand in front of the White House and speak, but the media, both newspaper and social media, has the right to decide what they'll allow in terms of maintaining that content on their platforms. Go.
So Grace, you had said that you talked about, you said a couple times, you cannot slander people.
Correct.
So how did we just hear the President of the United States say that Joe Biden wants to hurt God and hurt the Bible and is going to do all those things? How is he not held accountable for that? What is the Where's the accountability? Robin, one of our viewers, said, what recourse do the Hollywood elites, Oprah, Ellen, Gaga, Hanks, John Legend, Meryl Streep, have against all these recent pedo-conspiracy allegations that are all over social media? How is it enforced, what you just said? You said that that's true, but I don't see it being enforced.
Well, let
at
me
all.
explain. Let me explain something about the law in the area of defamation. In defamation law, if you're a public figure, you are subject to people being able to express opinions about you. They can have an opinion. So if it's President Trump's opinion that Joe Biden is bad for the Bible or bad, is trying to hurt God, that's his opinion. And that objectively the listener would understand that as opinion. So, and what is the harm to President Trump or Biden if he says it necessarily? Because there's no dollar value really to what happens, as opposed to if I were to say something about, President Trump, that a fact that was obscene and terrible, and it was absolutely untrue. Well, watch what happens. And this is the advantage I think a lot of times people in media take advantage of, is I can say something is true about a person, but the logical fallacy is, how do you prove something didn't happen? It's
So you
very,
can't prove a negative, basically.
you can't prove a negative. So what happens if let's say I'm a person that's famous and I've been accused of doing something untoward to a child, and somebody accuses me of that? Well, then what happens is I file the lawsuit to stop the person from saying that, but now I'm caught up in litigation where they get to investigate everything in my past to see what other dirt they can dig up on me, right?
Right.
So why would I ever want to fight that lawsuit and spend my money fighting someone who falsely accused me of something? It's much better just to ignore it. And that's what you see the response typically from people who are famous. It's more practical to just ignore it and move on, because those persons without evidence, people are getting smarter on social media. I'm watching, I've been a member on Trump's page for a very long time. And I used to watch things where people would post contradicting evidence to things that he said, and that person would get dogpiled by 800 people.
Sure.
You go there now, you don't see the same dogpile.
Mm-hmm.
And you see kind of the same repetitive kinds of posts. God bless President Trump, and we pray for him every day, and he's doing a great job, etc. Now, when people post opposing information, it's interesting to watch where you don't see the same dogpile, but more and more people are wising up and saying, yeah, you know what? Our critical thinking skills are getting better, because we are looking at things that post and say, you know what? I'm not going to sit here and try to prove a negative. That's becoming something that the average person understands now. And more people are beginning to demand evidence of the truth. How many times have I seen posted in media, where's your evidence of that? Show me something of that. So.
But we still don't care about that. Eric, you had something you wanted to say. Am I right?
I was just going to say, I hope that's true. I haven't been seeing that. And one of the things that John just talked about, this QAnon phenomenon, this QAnon cult that, he just mentioned these celebrities that have been really brutally attacked. The allegations are out of nowhere. And, sometimes in the case of Oprah, someone posts a video of her home being raided. It was not her home. There was nothing there. And, there was a story recently with Chrissy Teigen, and she blocked literally a million followers, because she was being harassed every single day, and her family started being harassed. And, so these kinds of things, and that's one of the big movements from a few of the social media platforms has been against QAnon. And then, of course, there's this big groundswell of people saying they're suppressing information and yada, yada, yada. Now, I already believe they have the right to do that. And especially when there's no evidence to suggest that,
it's dangerous content for which there is no evidence. It does impact people's lives negatively. I want to share something with you guys, and then I'll bring you into the aftermath of this. But I want to show you an example. I've been doing this a lot, but here's another example of something I saw on the internet this week. Now, I don't want to show who, I've got the person blocked out. You can't see who posted this, But this says, here's some more conspiracy for all you sheep. Now, the person that posted this considers those who don't believe this to be sheep and is not afraid to express that opinion on social media. That vaccine coming, and he talks about Moderna 3's in stage 3 of the vaccine. Now he's going to talk about the first CEO of Moderna was Anthony Fauci. He was roommates with Bill Gates at Cornell. Bill Gates designed the radio frequency identification and patented it under this number. Wake up. Are you awake yet? Let's go down the rabbit hole. IG Farben is infamous. Now, so I saw 2 different people posting this angrily this week. So I spent, now these are real people, okay? I would have no problem believing that a bot created that originally, but the people sharing it, reposting it, are real human beings, and I had no problem. It took me a few minutes to learn Fauci has never been the CEO of Moderna. That's very easy to determine. Gates never went to Cornell. They were not roommates there. IG Farben was dismantled after World War II when Soros was 14 years old. So I doubt he took it over. And that patent number is not linked to RFID. The RFID patent is held by an Italian man named Mario something or other, and that patent links to some type of cardiovascular thing, and nobody's name is recognizable on it. I found all this out in 5 minutes, and when I simply stated, all I said to these people in this thread that were going off about this, a lot of fear, a lot of anger in there, all I said to them was, this is not true. And I posted these things. I didn't call them names. I didn't say anything negative about you can believe what you want about Fauci, but I'm just simply stating to you, this is not true. These are the responses they gave me. Okay, so show me your research, not what Facebook or Google tells you is true or not. Now, this was really funny to me because I'm being asked to look, you're the one with the outrageous claim. Isn't the burden of proof on you? And you got this on Facebook. So how come I can't show you what's on Facebook or Google to prove it untrue? That rationale doesn't come into play here. Whether or not it's true or isn't them pulling anything is called censorship. And that's against your First Amendment. Whether or not you choose to believe this or that is your choice, and right as is also the right and choice to pose and So guys, obviously this person goes into sort of an angry rant that becomes, illegible. It's not even English anymore. Here's another one. Wake up, people. COVID is real. You're being lied to. 3 friends of mine have family diagnosed with the COVID when they tested negative and better, yet never actually physically tested. I don't really even know what that means. Another person in that same thread said to me, I want what you're drinking. Kool-Aid? Why is it so hard for you to believe that these POSs, pieces of shit, don't have what's best for any of us in mind? And why would you believe Facebook? So I'm being told that I'm a sheep and an idiot because I believe Facebook, which is where they posted this misinformation. But so these people, those of us that are out there resharing these things, we do not even have a discernible standard for what we will accept as fact or how to determine what's truthful. So I want to kind of let you guys comment on this, but I wanted to share those experiences with you and see what you thought.
Well, let me give you some perspective. Think about it the way the analytics work on Facebook. Part of the analytics is that if I search for, say, knitting on Facebook, I'm going to see repetitiously knitting websites, people that are interested in knitting, anything related to knitting is going to keep populating into my feed. And people need to understand that if I keep putting things in about COVID, conspiracy, I'm going to keep getting back feedback and positive validation that the things that I'm typing are real. And it's going to put me in a very small corner, and it's going to expose me to groups of people who think that same way. And if you happen to run across these groups of people, what starts to happen, and I've done this experiment, I created a Facebook account many years ago that's completely conservative, ultra religious, evangelical, and it's like that account lives in a whole different world. I never see any of the other news that's opposite of that. I only I only see and hear people who validate my viewpoint. So that's one of the things people have to understand. And this is what we're experiencing in social media, is that we as a nation, as a community, are experiencing growing pains. We are growing up with social media. We are starting to begin to understand the impact it has. And that's why you see a lot of the younger generation are saying, no, I don't want anything to do with Facebook. I'm going to go over here to something else. I'm going to do something else. And that basically a bunch of us boomers are hanging out on Facebook. But remember, then take a look at how many people are on Facebook and look at how many people are actually in that group. Because when you look at the sheer numbers of people in those groups, it's infinitesimally small. It's a very small group in relationship to the whole. So that having the ability to go onto that other account to remind myself that I'm seeking validation constantly in my current social sites that say, well, these are the things, these are the ideals, these are my values, but understand that everybody's doing that. And what it's doing is it's segregating us more into compartmentalizing us into our little social groups that echo our same beliefs. And if we happen to get caught up into one that doesn't echo our beliefs, then we can really get a misunderstanding of what's going on. People, remember this. You had Jim Jones and 900 people ended up drinking punch and killing themselves over the belief the world was ending. And what happened in the 80s, John, do you remember? People were like, oh yeah, another preacher coming along saying the world is coming to an end. And pretty soon people don't believe him anymore, right?
Yeah.
Well, we're starting to see that replicated in Facebook. People are starting to say, what, COVID's not, wait a minute, wait. The more they speak and see that what this person is saying is not true, the more the things that QAnon supposedly predicted would come to pass don't come to pass, such as the empty basement in the pizzeria. There's no basement in the pizzeria, things like that. Most people who are ready to see the truth, experience the truth, are going to go into that and accept that. And the other people who want to be comforted in their beliefs, whatever those beliefs might be, will continue to perpetuate those beliefs among themselves. But they will be left behind because we will, as a nation, as a community, continue to grow. And our experience with Facebook gets better. Our experience with scams. If I were to mention an IRS scam, for them calling you that we're going to put you in jail and they're coming for you right now if you don't send us the money right now, and we're going to tell you where to send the money, wire the money to. Well, most of us know that's a scam now. We know the IRS doesn't call you up, but it took experience. And that's what I think we're going through. I think our Constitution and the case law that follows it is well positioned to give us the protection we need so that these social media platforms can pull back and editorialize to help keep us safe, because it's in their commercial interest to do so. But it's also in our social media interest that when we see a lie, point it out. If you've done the research, share it, because the person that you're writing the truth for will not be convinced. But guaranteed there are others in that group that are watching and are going to say, you know what, this group is bullshit, and they're out of here. And you never hear a peep from them. But I've seen the change over the last 4 years. We are growing. We will get better.
That's so good to hear. I'm glad it's comforting. One of our viewers, Lee, said, I think Facebook is in over their heads. Now they're trying to have it both ways. I know what he's talking about. Because it seems like they're, well, Lee, maybe you could explain a little bit more about what you mean, and I can articulate what you're trying to say rather than me assume I understand. I want to talk to you guys about what happened at the New York Times. What's been going on. The editorial page editor, James Bennett, was forced to resign after he pushed an op-ed written by Senator Tom Cotton from Arkansas. And then the opinion editor, Barry Weiss, a lovely young lady, resigned and said Twitter is now editor-in-chief of the New York Times. And she, even though she said, look, you can think Tom Cotton is detestable, you can disagree with him, but I don't want to live in a world where the views of half the country can't be heard in the paper of record. And she said the reason Twitter is the assigning editor of the New York Times is because the printing press isn't the printing press anymore. The printing press is in each one of our pockets. Mm-hmm. So this is the reality of what we're dealing with now, right?
Oh, absolutely. This is the reality that we're dealing with, and more of us are taking that responsibility very seriously. Now we see social media posts of people saying that what's wrong with this country is that we were raised not to talk about politics and religion, right? But
Yeah.
now more people are bucking that. They are speaking up and they are countering things that aren't true. Because why? I think we have ingrained in each of us as Americans the essence of the Constitution, that we recognize how important these free speech rights are, but we also recognize the importance of truthful information, and there's people that are fighting for it. So we're not just keyboard warriors, we are actually defenders of our Constitution when we counter the mistruths that we see. And that's important, that every one of us who uses this platform takes on that responsibility. I mean, not everybody has to do the research, but those of us who love to research, like I love to research, and you'll always see a link posted with every time I comment and I say that's not true and here's why. And it gives everybody in that group an opportunity to learn the truth, because after all, the concept of freedom of speech has been long said early on in Brandenburg versus the Superior Court. There was in the Brandenburg case, they talked about the idea is that discourse has always been the marketplace of ideas, where people can consider ideas in many different forms and get down to what they feel is the most correct idea in terms of solving our problems in our community or in any kind of activism that we might have.
What do you think the challenges of discourse on social media are, Grace? Because I've talked a lot about this on the show. I feel like because a lot of this discourse happens behind a keyboard in an anonymous fashion, there isn't, the discus comes from the Greek, meaning the game, to throw back and forth. There isn't a back and forth. It's really a one-sided thing, and people feel emboldened to be crueler, to be more forceful about, and for some reason, not having that face-to-face contact. And maybe it's not face-to-face because even on the phone it's different, but just not feeling that there's a connection between two people. I think that people become a little bit colder and a little bit more quick to negative emotions. What do you think about that?
Well, I think one of the things that has to happen as part of the evolution is I think social media will be more particular. Like I moderate a community page, and I have a rule in there that if you don't have a real identity, in other words, if I can't link your account to a physical person that exists, you will not be allowed to comment on the page. And that's simply because you have to take ownership of the information and that you communicate to the community, then you better be responsible enough to own it. You can't just come on here and pretend to be, oh, I'm Tweety Bird, and and there's a big pedophilia ring in our town and this person's in it. And no, I'm sorry, but you don't get to come on the page. You will be removed. So that's one of the growing pains I'm looking at. We're seeing about the idea of creating false accounts. We'll come up with new guidelines for those kinds of issues, that exactly what you're facing. And, to the rest of your question, if you could repeat, I know what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is that we are experiencing the growing pains, and we are developing appropriate social media so that people do have to be honest in their accounts. And if they're not willing to be honest, there are platforms they won't be able to communicate upon.
We have to be on these things because, like Eric had said last week, the person who owned the pizza parlor and the Pizzagate thing, someone walked in there with a gun to kill that person because they believed something that wasn't true. That Twitter and Facebook, on August 7th, Facebook removed hundreds of accounts posing as Black Trump supporters and QAnon supporters. These accounts, hundreds of them, were linked to a Romanian troll farm. Why are Romanians trolling for the president? It's a very interesting thing.
Let me address that real quick. I want to say this, is that Benjamin Cardozo, one of our California Supreme Court justices, he wrote in an opinion once that the law cannot remedy every harm. And there are going to be harms because we have such a large world and we're so connected through this internet, this thing called the internet, is that we can't control the behaviors. So it's up to us to have responsibility to provide protection for ourselves in certain instances. So when the IRS calls wanting money, well, we've learned, we've grown up to realize, don't take that call. And again, like those violent things, what Facebook and Twitter and the other social media platforms have learned is that we can't host information that lacks credibility because we have a bit of a status as a news source, and people listen to that information. And if they're misled, are they not incited to eminent and lawless action, such as, let me go get a gun and kill the people down in the basement of the pizza parlor. So because of that, I think that's why you're seeing some of these platforms, and even Facebook, they didn't want to do it, become into the role of censorship. But I think now, because of recent decisions in the Supreme Court, they recognize that if they don't do some level of editorializing by limiting content that could be dangerous or could be obscene, that's where you get the child pornography issues coming in, or something that incites eminent lawless action, then they're voluntarily doing it in order to protect us. And let me talk about the offshore accounts. We're all getting smarter about it. We know the bots are out there. I know that President Trump's page has 28 million likes on it, people that like that page. But I also know that within 7 minutes of him posting, he will have 100,000 likes on anything he posts. How is it within 7 minutes of posting? Somebody's on a payroll. Somebody's getting paid, or computers are set up to automatically generate this. And this is the other thing. When it comes to account recovery with Facebook, I've seen accounts that if you go look at their profile, they stopped posting any legitimate accounts going back to 2007, 2009. And if you Google search, you can find companies that will sell you 800 accounts. They've been recovered in terms of their passwords. They've been recovered in terms of their identity. They can put any picture on there, be anybody they want to. Here's 800 accounts to do that with. So if that is something that's being sold on the marketplace, and the more we know that it's being sold on the marketplace, us users get the choice to say, you know what, I don't want to be on that page because that page has a bunch of fake people on it. It's up to us to grow up with the social media companies and use the social media for what it's really intended for.
You and I agree. Go ahead, Eric. Go ahead, Eric.
Well, in a phone call recently with John, I was talking about this. I read this article recently that suggested almost 50% of the misinformation that's being shared on Twitter is sourced back to bots, to fake accounts, and to farms, as John was just mentioning. And I'm encouraged by your optimism. I have not felt as optimistic as you sound, but I do. One of the things that I said to John on this phone call, and I want to bring up now, is that it is our responsibility. It is our duty. And what I said to John is, and I feel this with my whole heart, it's incumbent upon us Americans to not fall. There are in China and in Russia and in other states that are very actively, and have for several years, been trying to sow the seeds of discontent and chaos. And they're being very successful, and they're doing this through social media. And it's our responsibility. The only way social media isn't going to be able to stop it. They can take certain things down, but the majority of this misinformation is being shared by people. They see something and they have this, like John just said, he knows somebody that shared that thing. So, but that person didn't create it. Somebody else, a bad actor with bad intentions, created something that was false. And because there's something that triggered something in somebody that supported one of their views, or sort of fired that amygdala, they fired it off, and then they fired it off, and they fired it off. And it's incumbent upon all of us as Americans to protect our country, to not be, essentially what's happening is we're inadvertently jumping in with the people that are trying to divide our country. And it just, as John just said, it takes 5 minutes to check something out before you share it on. It might take 30 seconds to check. I mean, if I see something that I know one fact is off, I disregard the rest of it. And I think we have to do a better job, and you think we are already growing in that way. I hope that's true, because it doesn't, that Pizzagate thing, you would think that wouldn't happen again, but it wasn't that long ago that some lady got arrested, and she had these knives, and she was going after Joe Biden from the same QAnon group she was convinced that he was going to put a stop to the crusade to stop these pedophiles, and she was going to try to kill him. And
but remember, let's keep things in perspective. Before she was ever going to go after Biden with knives, somebody went after President Ford with a gun, and there was no social media. So you got to maintain perspective. The other thing is that as people moderate groups, I wanted to throw out there to your point, is that we develop a better criteria of what we allowed post in our own groups that we host, in terms of being more cautious that when there's a group I belong to that has a lot of people in it, and I'm always pointing out, oh, you're starting to engage in ad hominem attacks. So you're conceding that I've already won the argument. Thank you very much. People are learning from those of us who model proper debate behavior, which is you don't attack the messenger, you attack the message and stay on message. You don't engage in whataboutisms or what ifism, because that takes you off the topic. And as a moderator, my job is to keep people on target and say, look, if you want to talk about that topic, make a new post and let people talk about that. And so that's helpful for the education, but that's why education is so important. When I was in high school, if you have kids in high school today, I'll tell our listeners, please consider supporting Junior Statesmen of America. You can Google search that. It's a high school organization that helps students learn about debate and talking about politics in a way, because one of the things that's irreconcilable in politics is that we have different values. And based on our values, we may not always be able to regulate or legislate rules that keep both sides of the fence happy. So there's always going to be this push-pull in politics. The debate of values and the art of persuasion is necessary. Someone posted in the chat, I'll also mention, they says, well, what is the proper use of social media? Well, it was devised as an advertising device. And it's quid pro quo. If you agree to be advertised to, we'll let you have a voice. So right now, people who never had a voice are now getting one.
Oh, that's such a great point. It's so important.
And because they're just now getting a voice, they may not know how to properly use it. How many people, because I've been trained in debate, have gone on to go ahead and private message me, and I've taught them, I said, you chase people away when you approach people with this. Have you thought about presenting your ideas this way? So it's about education. I enjoy doing it. It's a hobby of mine, talking about our Constitution and politics and trying to do it in a way that makes sense, that doesn't include the ad hominem attacks and includes being willing to listen to other viewpoints because you might be wrong. And that's one of the things that's been helpful.
Grace, that's the bottom, the foundational concept of this show is to model civil discussion and disagreement. That's the foundational idea behind the show, so that even if we don't agree, we can model how we do that. Guys, this is Common Ground. I'm John Lombardo, your host. You're watching our guest, Grace Rodriguez. She is a delegate to the Democratic Party in the 45th Assembly and an attorney who has recently completed Harvard University's course on American government constitutional foundations. We're glad to have her. Do me a favor, please, if you are watching this video right now, please like it right now. It does help us to like the page. And so please punch that like button. And if you have questions, we want to hear from you. We want to read your comments and your questions. Please feel free to join in. It's an interactive show. Joe Lombardo, who's my brother, said, it reminds me of when we tried to get the GMO foods to label the products. It inevitably became the task of the consumer to seek out non-GMO foods. Then non-GMO food producers took the opportunity to label as a selling point. It falls upon us, the consumers of information, to be more discerning and skeptical of what we ingest and, more importantly, share. Boy, that's right, Joe. It's not only what we ingest, but what we regurgitate that's so important here. And then I want to talk about some of the subtler forms of censorship that are in the news right now. Get your guys' takes on this. Let me give you a couple of examples. With the United States Post Office, the Postmaster General DeJoy, who is, this is just a fact, he is a major Trump donor. Allegedly, he admitted to implementing policies that delay mail. Postal workers have confirmed this. The internal documents prohibit overtime and tell workers to leave mail behind if it would delay their routes. Now, this is kind of an underhanded way to censor our ability to do certain things, maybe vote. I don't know. It seems a little bit. I don't know where the conspiracy theorists are on this one. That seems pretty crazy to me. And then also Democrats. A Democrat super PAC is funding a Kansas Republican named Chris Kobash to the tune of $4 million. They're funding his campaign for $4 million because they believe he'll be easier to defeat in the election. That's kind of an underhanded tactic, isn't it? So these are underhanded things we see going on to censor. I don't know if it's censorship, but it's certainly putting your finger on the scale to affect outcomes, don't you think?
Can I just add one little thing, because I want to
Sure.
hear Grace's take on this. I mean, the post office has a unique position in our country's history, and if I understand it correctly, if I remember correctly, rather, that it specifically is designed to help us spread democracy. That without it, the people in rural areas have no ability to be able to communicate and to participate in the democratic process. And so I'm especially interested in what your take is with that.
Well, Eric, a private one of the people, and I'm sorry, I don't remember precisely who this person was, what their expertise was in the matter, but said that this is almost an attempt to privatize the postal service and make it a paid arm of the government. So that should be unsettling to us. Grace, what do you think?
Well, I think one of the things that we really have to remember is that there's been this push-pull between privatization and public services about what's appropriate for the government to manage and what's better managed by the private sector. I would direct people to Nick Hanauer's Gardens of Democracy, which talks about that the balance of those two, the push and pull that happens that with that kind of the stressors on the economy as what should be private and what should be public are something that changes as technology changes as private entities arise and what labor is available. So there's a lot of economics that go into what's appropriate and what's not at any given time. But rest assured, and I'll throw this out there to anybody who's interested, edx.org is a platform put out by the Harvard, Yale, and MIT for different courses they offer for free. And education is key, understanding the foundations. This course, I was living with a lot of despair about the partisanship that's going on in this country and how angry we are at each other. You know, the different factions are angry at each other. But if you go back and read the history, and I'm reading a textbook that talks about what went on back then, nothing's changed. It's always been like this. This partisanship has always existed. But what you haven't seen is that now we have a platform that makes it available for everybody to see. So now everybody's laying witness to how ugly and contentious it is. And so you have a Supreme Court, since Citizens United says that anybody can pull their money together and do whatever they want in terms of supporting different political candidates. That's their right to spend money, that's an expression of political speech, spending money on a candidate, spending money on an issue. And it doesn't matter if it's there to be divisive or not, as long as it's truthful, it's not slanderous. Defamation will take care of that. So if I go say something that's a complete lie about a candidate, they can be called out on that, that they can be called on the carpet for that. But it's up to us to be responsible enough, now that we have access to the internet and it's so widely available, we have access to learn about the candidates, to learn about the issues, that we're not going to be duped like we might have been had we didn't have access to those materials previously. We have access to information better than we ever have before. Now it's up to us to pick up what I call a simple toolkit of gaining access and looking at something long enough to say, what are my values and who are the people that match my values? And so that's our responsibility, because remember, the greatest enemy of democracy is not socialism, it's not communism, it's not Antifa. Our greatest enemy is apathy.
Amen to that. Great, Grace. So let me see if I understand you. And Eric, did you want to say something?
Go ahead.
Okay, I just want to see if I understand the point. So when I read that about Democrat super PAC investing $4 million in a candidate's campaign because they think that candidate will be easier to beat in the fall, um, I, I found that to be incredibly sleazy. And I thought, and this is another example of people funding a camp, using money to tip the scales. Now you're saying that that's not really that out of the ordinary. That as long as there's no libel involved, that it's part of our process. Am I getting that right? Is that right?
Not exactly. The shade on it is this, is that I'm not giving moral judgment about whether it's right or wrong or sleazy or this or that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying this is the facts. We have been dealing with this kind of behavior on both sides, on every side of the aisle. Think about the NRA and the funding that it's contributed towards candidates and how unfairly advantaged some candidates who are more wanting to regulate guns. So you can't really put a regulation. We just, as a society, as a Supreme Court, as a government, have not decided to regulate those PACs in this way. We've tried in the past, but we just haven't done it yet. I'm not saying right or wrong, but what I'm saying, in that great push and pull that has happened in 240 years, we come up with laws, they work for a little while, then we come up with other laws, they come out. And this is exactly what you're seeing today. You're seeing the same behavior. It doesn't sound appealing to you. So you as a voter in that community, of course, are not going to support that PAC. You're not going to, because we vote with our dollars, we vote with our feet, we go vote every time we go to the ballot box. And that's the greatest thing about our country. And protecting our voice and being able to cast that ballot is the greatest protection against all of this conduct.
We have a question for you, Grace, from one of our viewers. Pete asked, do you believe that bigger government is moving in a direction to control or limit our choices in terms of healthcare and energy?
Well, one of the things I know is this, is when you get about 5 people or more trying to control anything, I've never seen it succeed. It's always abject failure, because the truth always comes out. People don't cooperate. They don't always have the same vision. So this idea that this entity thing called the government is out to, or some people are out to give the government enough power to control us. Impossible. It's never going to happen. Nobody has that kind of power singularly. Not even Bezos has that kind of power. He has a lot of influence in the government, but do we look controlled? Are you looking around this country? We have riots, and we've had riots all over the place. We've had peaceful protests all over. We've had all kinds of expression. You are not going to control the American people. It's never going to happen. There's too many people here that enjoy shows like this, that are thinking about what their rights are, that treasure what our Constitution gives us and what being an American means, regardless of what our biological backgrounds might be, wherever we come from, whatever mix of race we are, religion. We all value this idea of what it means to be an American and what the Constitution is. So I don't think there's anybody that's going to be able to get that control. And if you think somebody has that kind of control, I'd like to see it. Show me the proof of that, because I don't see people cooperating well enough to be able to make that happen.
I completely agree with you. And one of the things that drives me crazy about all this this sound and fury about what to me appears to be a lot of misinformation, whether it's Fauci being the former CEO of Moderna, or Mother Teresa being a trafficking in children. And by the way, you think I'm joking? Let me show you something I saw on social media this week. Share this with you all. Mother Teresa was a child trafficker funneling millions of dollars to the Vatican. So, right. All right. So, that is out there. One of the things that bothers me about all that kind of stuff is I've talked to so many people on this show in the last year, Eric and I have, and I know that we all, I don't care who you are, we all want term limits. We want affordable health care. We want money out of politics. But as long as we're fighting over pedophiles and pizza parlors, we're not going to ever get that stuff done, because we have our energy and our focus spread around these silly things that keep us fighting rather than uniting. And look, there's always going to be 30% of stuff we don't agree about. That's fine. One of the things that makes a democratic republic work is when the people get together on the 70% they can agree upon and get it done. Put pressure on officials to get it done. So yeah. Anyway, that's my little rant about that. Let's see if
John,
we go ahead, Eric.
one of the things that I always think about, there somehow um, the Republicans have just done a brilliant marketing job with the idea of small government. They don't believe in small government any more than the other side does. They just, the two sides just believe in government in different places, and it's just better marketing. Um, it's like, I want control over these areas, and I want control over these areas, and if one side appeals to you, then then you're with them. If the other side appeals to you, then you're with them. But both sides are intrusive and give liberty in pretty equal amounts. It's just a matter of where they're doing it. What intrusions do Republicans make? What intrusions do Democrats make? It typically, but I just don't. It's just a pitch to say, I don't buy this. One side is big government, the other side isn't. They're both equal in liberty and in control, and it's just a matter of, where do your priorities lie? We've talked a lot about this. There are certain things that I would like to see our government do, and other things that I would like to see our government stop doing. And I don't,
let me throw this idea out at you, Eric, is that I mentioned the book Nick Hanauer's Gardens of Democracy because he gives the rationale in what areas government should be involved in terms of social, taking care of the people and providing for the people. Government is merely representative of our agreements of what we want government to do with us. We put our tax dollars in and we decide what we want it to do for us. But when I talked about apathy, when we get voter turnout at the 20% level, the 30% level, well, then who's in charge of those candidates? And what the last 40 years of apathy, don't talk politics and religion, and what the apathy has created is that the very wealthy among us have the opportunity to feed money to both sides of the aisle to get the regulations they want to be the most profitable and why wouldn't they? If I was very wealthy, I would do the same thing. I remember contributing to a city attorney's race because there was an outcome I was looking for in a case pending before it. Why wouldn't I want to influence if I had the money to do it? I would do it. And that's just people's natural tendencies. So when I talk about how apathy is so dangerous, well, if I look at our audience and I ask out on Facebook, how many of you have gone to a local party club meeting where they have the candidates show up and you get to meet them? Well, I'm glad you've done it, Eric, and we're no relation, but hey, good to see another Rodriguez on the show. but the point is that if you're not going to a club meeting or participating, then you won't be educated. You won't get to meet the people that are going to basically go up the food chain here and go into higher office, and you won't really know what they're about. So you don't know how much of them are controlled. Right now, even though I'm a Democrat, I'm watching a city council controlled by real estate developers. And how did they get there? Because we didn't vote. It's our own damn fault. We did not get involved. We didn't elect the people that say, you know what, I'm not going to take money from developers. I'm going to do the right thing. But remember, be careful what you pray for, because we talk about democracy. But even going back when they were starting our country, I'll throw this out real quick so I don't take a lot of time with this, is that the concern is you had a nation of people who were farmers, newly freed slaves who didn't have the education. And the concern was, if we let these people vote, they could be influenced by anyone, and it could be dangerous for our country. And on the other hand, we have that same mentality now. There's people that believe some people shouldn't be allowed to vote because the majority voting on an issue, if that had happened, if a majority could do whatever it wanted in this country, then we'd have no civil rights law. We would still have segregation. Things would not have changed in this country. Women wouldn't be able to have a credit card, or we would still be property of men. So we have to look at that. We are more than that. Education is so important that we have to make it available, because if we don't make education available, people will not participate. And if we don't participate, that is the greatest danger to our democracy. And participation is facilitated by our First Amendment rights in these social media platforms. We want government to stay out of the social media platforms, but we also want our private platforms to do the right thing in terms of editorializing the values that are clearly American, that have been established by our Supreme Court, protecting against slander, indecency, and imminent harm.
Well, we got a couple of comments I want to read. And I remember, if you just said something in response to a comment, I might not know what you meant, so I can't read it. So if you want to expound upon what you said to make it a complete thought, then I can read it. Betty Fay said, my friend was having a heart attack and he shopped for a less expensive hospital to go to because he believed in the free market. He died before he could figure it out. That's horrible. I'm very sorry to hear that. That's serious, huh? I'm sorry, very sorry to hear that. It's terrifying. And then Pete said, Eric, I'm not sure you were accurate in the assessment about Republicans versus establishment Republicans. The purists in this arena really do want less government, and they are not always wealthy. And then Betty said, this is because our country is based on racism. So I think that, if we're going to talk about, I don't want to get too far down that road, Betty, about racism. I do think that that's an economic challenge. But if we're talking about how do you, Grace, one of the things I love about what's happening in the movement to expand the equality of people of color when it comes to law enforcement is how involved it's gotten people. Because, like you're saying, apathy is the problem, and people are off the couch, out in the streets. And I know there's been trouble. Certainly, there's been trouble. There's been bad actors. There's been crime committed. But when you look at the number of people who have participated in these protests, I've been in two of them myself. The vast majority of these people are protesting peacefully, and they're getting somewhere. Now, there's a lot of things being accomplished. So, how do we organize? What's the best, most effective way we can combat that money in politics at the local and at the national level?
Well, I think the grassroots candidates are doing it right. These small dollar donations and getting more and more people involved. The grassroots movement, progressive movement that's happening inside the Democratic Party is absolutely right. And I do want to address Betty's point as well. She's absolutely right that this country historically has profited off racism, of always scapegoating a class of people, particularly African Americans in this country. And I won't go too far down that road, but to say this is that we've got to make that right. And you're absolutely right that protesting has gotten attention, because one of the things I recognize in dealing with my millennial, and even what's after millennial, Gen Z, what's after the millennials,
I think you're right.
They hear me talk about racism and they look at me like they don't understand. And part of the reason why my nieces don't understand is because they're mixed. And being mixed is like, race doesn't have the same context for them because of the mix. For them, they're like, why are you talking about race? This shouldn't matter. And so they don't quite get it the same way I do, and seeing the perspective that I have on it. But what I will say to your question, I lost my train of thought there for a second. I'll stop with that, but I did want to address Betty's point. Yes, with gerrymandering, all about to maintain controlling the narrative. And years before, when all it was newspapers that you had a way to communicate with, then it became television. Now you have text phones and cell phones, and you have social media. The more communication that has opened up, now we're starting to really see the truth about where control and power is consolidated and how to break that up. And that's education and access to information is the greatest way to combat this, this power being left in the hands of few.
It's so true. And it's such a thing. We have to be responsible about the fact that we all have the marketplace in our pocket now, like that, Barry Weiss said. Eric, what were you going to say? I'm sorry.
Yeah, John. I was gonna just touch on the point that you were making before, is that in terms of in terms of influence, and Grace started talking about grassroots movements, and you know, as far as demonstrators go, as I've talked about on the show, and I do some advocacy work with the disability community, and sometimes that means meeting with legislators in person, and sometimes we do certain campaigns. One of the things that is true about most politicians is they want either money, or they want numbers. They want to know that you represent a part of the community. And so getting involved, you've got to gather up people. And one of the ways that we've seen, you and I have talked about some of these issues around policing our entire lives. So Grace, just, John and I have known each other for 38 years. And it we haven't been able to have an adult conversation about some of these things until now. And what it took was this many people, 20 million people, went out in the street and said, hey, this is an issue for us. And all of a sudden, overnight, corporations started making certain changes. Politicians started talking about things that they were afraid to talk about before. So numbers matter. Our participation is absolutely, and as Grace pointed out earlier, and you and I talk about all the time, that we are leaving it up to rich people to run our country and make all the decisions if we don't participate. And
Absolutely.
That's the point I wanted to underline.
And I want to give a shout out. There's a group out there that is formulated that's nonpartisan. It's the West Valley People's Alliance that has recently formulated and has really given a voice to those people in the community that are fed up with Democratic politics and Republican manipulation, all of those politics. And they're saying, we want action. We want things to be done. And we want to honor the roots of our Constitution, which is about the equality of all people and being able to treat people, with love and compassion. So if anybody's interested, West Valley People's Alliance, very important. And
how would we find them, Grace? I'll type their email address.
You can look for them on Facebook, West Valley People's Alliance. And the other thing that people can do to have the difficult conversation is people talk about creating safe space to be able to talk about this. I'm a recovering racist. I'll admit it. I was raised with a lot of racist viewpoints. And even though my last name might be Rodriguez, I've identified as Latina all my life, hiding behind my last name, because God forbid I admit that I'm actually half white. I'm only, you know what I mean? And so I need a safe place to talk about that. So there is a group called, it's called White People for Black Lives Matter. And it's an opportunity where you meet other people who are feeling so uncomfortable that we were raised with these ideas and that we thought these things without even questioning them. And now we're having a space where we can call into question and teach each other about where our privileges, because that's our job. Because if I think about how many times, and the people that I've listened to speak on this topic saying, what an imposition that we put on people of color to explain to us our privilege. That's not their job. I think about how we have to take responsibility for that. What are we doing not to create that kind of equality? And again, it comes down to communication. Are we going to communicate in ad hominem, attack each other for what we think and what we believe, or are we going to get to the points of the matter of what's really going on and how would we fix it? That's what we have to be focused on, and not be deterred and distracted by all this partisanship.
Grace, it's been such an honor to have you here with us tonight. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this, and I hope you will come back very soon.
The privilege is mine.
Oh, no, I hope you'll come back and do this with us again very soon. Everybody, that's great. We're going to say goodbye to Grace. If you have questions or anything, you can pop them in. She can read them in the comments later, but we just really thank you being here. Thank you so much, Grace.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Grace. Nice to meet you.
All right. Eric, what do you say, Chief?
I don't know. I really appreciated Grace's optimism, and one of the things that she said, and I know this about our government, and one of the things that that Pete's comment made me think about was like our government is designed to work slowly. It is designed to have these checks and balances, which is also one of the reasons why I get alarmed about some of the things that are going on. Um, you know, uh, we talked about overreach a little bit, and there's some things, some surveillance of demonstrators that have been recently in the news, and some things that and this, I don't know. There's some things that make me nervous, um, but um, but I do know that our government is designed to have checks and balances, and I do believe that um, that the majority of us in this country, a lot of the biggest topics, we are pretty close together.
We are.
We're not, the most important topics, the majority of us are not, really far apart. We're pretty close together. And so, if we can avoid um, getting distracted by these fringe topics, and including if that comes from the president. I mean, him talking about guns and God, how's the candidate's going to be. Uh, it's just we've got to stay focused on some of the principles, and having a fair election is good for everybody. Having not being distracted by these silly things that pop up here and there, and our participation is absolutely necessary. And whether that's researching some things online, or calling your senator, or whatever it is, we need to participate. And if we don't participate, then we leave it to the fringes to determine what our country's going to look like, and I don't want that. So
Neither do I. And Carol said, let's not start at the top. We need to start at the local level, get involved in the small issues, the local issues, take interest in the state's issues. I guess democracy has to trickle up. Carol, that was brilliantly stated. Love it. And guys, this is Common Ground. If you have not done so yet and you're watching, please like this right now. And of course, if you haven't followed our page, please follow Common Ground and share it and tell people about it. And with that, I'm going to wrap it up with the way I see it. What a great show. I'm delighted we got to be here with everybody tonight. And I really appreciate all of you being here. Really cool. All right, guys, whoa. That's good. That jumped way ahead for me. The way I see it. And if you're new to the show, this is sort of my little moment when I get to wrap it up, because it's my show. All right. I'm going to start this one off with a Bob Dylan lyric. The idiot wind, blowing every time we move our teeth. We are idiots, babe. It's a wonder that we still know how to breathe. And in contrast to Grace's lovely optimism, which I'm sure is where I would come if I sat and contemplated it with a good heart, I am pessimistic sometimes when I see what we embrace out there in the world. Today, in a hot off the presses story, an intelligence report was released by Bill Evanina, who leads election security efforts at the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. He confirms that Russia is indeed once again seeking to influence our election in favor of Trump. China, on the other hand, appears interested in standing in the way of Trump's re-election efforts. Now, before your brain runs off to your preferred corner to defend or accuse either candidate, let the content and the substance of what I've just said sink in for you. Our high-level intelligence agencies now have to invest considerable effort into discerning how foreign governments are successfully manipulating American elections. There are a couple of remarkable features to this. Number one, the fact that while our foes have likely been trying to mess with our internal mechanics since the Cold War, up until recently, they've found cracks in the walls to make it through. Now, and it's not until social media did the gates get kicked wide open. Number two is the successful part, meaning that it's working. U.S. intelligence determined beyond a shadow of a doubt that Russia attempted to aid Trump's election in 2016. Why they did it and how successful they were are interesting subjects and important. They need to be discussed. But tonight I want to talk about how they did it. It's easy to just blame it all on social media. It has certainly made their job 100 times easier. But to stop there would be to succumb to a dangerous delusion about who we are as a nation and a culture. There is another more important reason these campaigns have become effective enough to require the attention of our investigative and intelligence agencies on a daily basis. American gullibility. We in these United States have long demonstrated an insatiable appetite for drama. It's the reason we've traded reading and conversation for TMZ and YouTube. It's the reason I have a show on Facebook. We fell in love with the idea of celebrity in the 80s, swooned over reality TV in the 90s, and in the last decade, we fell in love with ourselves. Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram gave us a stage that was both real and imagined from which to stand and crow, and we loved it. Now, we're making the stories that we imagine ourselves starring in a lot more interesting than they really are. Government conspiracies swirl about us. International criminal enterprises abound in our midst. And we get to cast ourselves as the heroes in the story by exposing the hidden forces that assail us. Yes, if it weren't for these courageous super sleuths on my Facebook feed, I would never have learned that Tom Hanks is a pedophile. And Ellen DeGeneres in real life, she's mean. And I'm not joking. I saw someone accuse Hanks of being a pedophile this week. I'm going to show you. I'll share my screen with you. I saw somebody accuse Tom Hanks of being a pedophile this week based entirely on his reaction to Ricky Gervais jokes. So this is what I saw posted on somebody's Facebook page. When many think I think you may want to find out why. Ask Ricky Gervais, do your homework. Watch Ricky Gervais Golden Globes on YouTube and pay close attention to everything he says. So based upon the way he reacted to Ricky Gervais jokes, we are to believe that he is a pedophile. This is preposterous, yes, but it's what people believe. I'm not joking about this. So, make no mistake, our enemies have invited us to a feast of poison with which to choke us. Social media is the table. Utter mad bullshit may be the food. But like I said last week, that poison can't have any effect on us unless we sit down at that table and shove it into our mouths. The antidote to the poison is abstinence. Fittingly ironic, since asking Americans to abstain from stoking their egos on social media will probably be as successful as Catholics asking teenagers not to hump. But I'm asking anyway. And if you can't abstain, at least understand the formula that they're using on us. It goes like this. Point to a boogeyman, make him or her or it a threat. Paint anyone who doesn't see that threat the way you do as a threat also, likely in secret cahoots with said boogeyman. It's working, like I said, but there really is a cure. We just have to remember how to do it. It's called critical thinking, and it's a learned skill, so just about anybody should be able to master it. Cambridge defines critical thinking as the process of thinking careful about a subject or idea without allowing feelings or opinions to affect your judgment. Dictionary.com defines it as disciplined thinking that is clear, rational, open-minded, and informed by evidence. How much discourse do you see on your Facebook page or your Twitter feed that matches this criteria? So how do we do it? How do we engage in critical thinking? How do we become critical thinkers? Well, I have a suggestion. Here's my list of top 5 ways. Number 1, don't believe outrageous crap without solid evidence. Pretty simple. Number 2, understand that your fear is an effective distraction. Example, if you're worried about Hollywood or the Clintons selling kids along with pepperoni slices out of a basement, the truth is that 95% of all sexual abuse against children happens with a family member. 80% of all trafficking in the U.S. comes from the foster care system that children are placed into. What's happening to those kids while you're Scooby-Dooing wild theories about famous people? We don't need you uncovering a satanic cabal from your laptop. We need you writing to your legislators to fund more programs for social workers to address the real issues. Number 3, if it makes you angry or scared, odds are very good that that was the goal. Don't trust it. If it causes those types of emotional responses, don't trust it. We'll do less about the actual issue if we're distracted. Number 4, be honest with yourself. Conspiracy theories aren't about uncovering the truth. They're about feeling special because you're the one who knows what others don't. They play to our egos. They don't free us. Quite the opposite. The research on this is quite interesting. Have a look at why people get so invested in conspiracy theories and ignore the very real scary things that are happening all around them in front under their noses. Finally, stop seeing your fellow Americans as an existential threat. With COVID and racial tensions flaring and all the election hubbub, the vast majority of your fellow Americans are just like you. They're feeling angry and powerless. How about some compassion and commiserating? Even if there are a few out there who pose a real threat to you, they won't be vanquished on Facebook. Living in fear makes you susceptible to the loony bin bullshit of all kinds that's out there. Plus, it's no fun to live in fear. If you really want to make yourself safe from people you disagree with, go meet them. Talk to them. Make them friends you don't have to worry about. Listen to them. You'll find you agree on a good many things in most cases. I never thought I'd hear myself say this, but when it comes to social media, I want to see more cat videos. Not because I like cats so much. I don't really, although I have 2 cats. I want to see the cat videos as a strategy to thwart our foes. Imagine Putin calling an emergency meeting at the Kremlin and saying, "We need new strategy. They aren't fighting anymore. They're just sharing banana bread recipes." A solution that is both patriotic and delicious. Wouldn't that be nice? So the next time you head to the internet to set the world to right, remember, your social media page is not where that job is going to get done. Likely all you're doing is abetting an enemy who truly does mean you harm. And as far as being a courageous hero, defending truth, justice, and the American way, if you're doing it from your laptop, sharing conspiracies while eating a sandwich at midnight, I got a truth bomb for you. You're less like Clark Kent and more like Clark Griswold. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. That's our show. No show next week. It's my birthday, so we're going to take the week off. But we'll be back the following week with a really cool show. I'm excited to share it with you. Thank you all for being here. We love you. Have a great night. Be safe.
Be well, be safe.
Like and share the show. Bye, everybody.